June 6, 1944. 6:30 a.m., Normandy, France. Through the fog and the roar of crashing waves, thousands of Allied soldiers appeared on the horizon. Boats, tanks, men. More than the German forces had ever expected, at least not here. The Nazi troops scrambling along the beaches of Normandy were outnumbered, outgunned, caught completely off guard. Because according to German intelligence, the invasion was supposed to happen 150 miles away, at Calais. And so hundreds of thousands of German soldiers sat waiting, defending an empty beach, while the Allies stormed their way into France and changed the course of history. The Nazis had been deceived, brilliantly, completely, and it was largely thanks to one man. A man who had no military training, no espionage background, no connections to intelligence agencies, just a chicken farmer from Barcelona who spent years trolling the Third Reich from his living room. Here's the question that haunts me. If you had no experience, no resources, and no one believed in you, would you still try to change the course of a war? Let me know in the comments, because that's exactly what Juan Pujol García did. And somehow, he became the greatest spy who never left his house. Before the chaos, Spain, 1936. Before World War II consumed Europe, Spain was tearing itself apart. The Spanish Civil War had erupted. Republicans versus nationalists. Ideology versus ideology. Brother against brother. And no one hated it more than Juan Pujol García. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't political. He was a chicken farmer trying to mind his own business in Barcelona. But the war didn't care. His farm was seized by the government. His mother and sister were taken, and he, reluctantly, desperately, was forced to fight. He despised the extremism on both sides, the fanaticism, the violence disguised as conviction. So when World War II began creeping across Europe, and he saw the same pattern emerging on a global scale, something inside him snapped. He decided he was going to do something, anything, even if no one believed he could. The offer. No one wanted. In 1941, Pujol walked into the British Embassy in Madrid with a simple proposal. "Let me spy on the Germans for you." The British looked at him. This unassuming man with no credentials, no training, no network, and politely declined. They didn't trust him, they didn't need him, so Pujol did what any reasonable person would do. He went to the other side, becoming a Nazi, on paper. This time, Pujol walked into the German embassy. But now, he played a different role. He pretended to be a passionate Nazi supporter, a Spanish government official eager to serve the Reich. At the time, Germany's spy network in Britain was weak, unreliable. They desperately needed eyes on the ground. Pujol was hired almost immediately. They gave him a codebook, a bottle of invisible ink, £3,000 in cash, about $500,000 today, and they told him to move to London and start feeding them intelligence. Instead, he moved to Portugal, and he pretended to be in London. The art of fake spying, armed with nothing but a tourist guidebook, a map of Britain, and a train timetable from his local library, Pujol started writing reports. He described walks through central London, warships leaving the southwest coast, military drills near Lake Windermere, cafes he'd visited, days when he felt unwell. Everything sounded real, detailed, personal, and the Germans believed him. But Pujol didn't stop there. He started inventing an entire network of sub-agents to feed him information. There was the Swiss-German businessman stationed in Liverpool, the Venezuelan student in Glasgow, the Portuguese man living in Wales, the pilot carrying his letters from London. Each one had a backstory, a family, a life. None of them existed. But if the Germans ever questioned his information, Pujol could blame his agents. After all, they were the ones reporting it. And it worked. The Germans were so impressed they started paying him $500 a month, about $11,000 in today's money, to fund his network. But this was only the beginning. The lucky lie. In March 1942, Pujol sent a report to the Germans. A convoy of 18 ships left Liverpool on March 28th, headed for Malta. He made it up. But by sheer coincidence, a fleet had actually left Liverpool around that time. Before his letter even reached the Germans, it was intercepted by Britain's intelligence agency, MI5. Panic mode. A full-scale manhunt was launched to find this mysterious spy network operating inside Britain. But they found nothing. Then, someone at MI5 actually read the letters carefully and noticed something odd. One of Pujol's agents claimed that people in Glasgow will do anything for a liter of wine. A liter of wine? Britain didn't use the metric system, and Scots weren't exactly known for their wine preferences. Whoever was writing these letters clearly wasn't in Britain, and yet the Germans had wasted time and resources hunting down Pujol's fake convoy. MI5 realized what was happening. Someone was feeding the Nazis false information, and it was working. They were so impressed, they tracked Pujol down and recruited him as a real British spy. In April 1942, Pujol moved to London, for real this time. He was given the codename Garbo, and now, with access to actual intelligence, he was about to take his game to a whole new level. Operation Misdirection. The Allies were planning a surprise offensive on the North African coast, where Nazi forces were gaining strength, but they needed the Germans looking the other way. So, over the next several months, Garbo started dropping hints, careful, deliberate, specific, that suggested an attack was being planned for Norway instead. One of his agents reported seeing mountaineering drills. Another spotted Canadian troops gathering in eastern Scotland. Rumors of Russian troops moving westward. He never said Norway outright, but he painted the picture. Hitler himself grew increasingly concerned about a Norwegian invasion and moved hundreds of thousands of troops north to defend it. Then came Garbo's masterstroke. With the African invasion set for November 8th, Garbo wrote a letter to the Germans on November 1st, detailing exactly how the Allies were going to carry out the operation, but he deliberately delayed sending it. The letter arrived on November 9th. One day too late. The day before, over 100,000 Allied troops had stormed the North African coast. The Germans received all the correct details, but couldn't do a thing about it. Their response? "We are sorry it arrived too late, but your last report was magnificent." Building an empire of ghosts. Over the next year, Garbo continued expanding his network. By the end of 1943, he was managing 27 fictitious agents. All of them had to be paid, of course. The Germans were sending him over $100,000 a month. They were so pleased with his work, they stopped hiring new spies in Britain altogether. Why bother? They already had the best. Or so they thought. D-Day. The ultimate deception. The Normandy landings were going to be the largest amphibious invasion in human history. Over 2 million soldiers, 12 nations, more than 100,000 vehicles. Pulling this off without the Germans knowing was nearly impossible. But Britain had Garbo. This time, instead of letters, Garbo was instructed to send messages via encrypted Morse code. He'd write in Spanish, break the message into 5-character clusters, scramble it with a codebook, then transmit it by radio. Faster, more detailed, more dangerous. And Garbo used it masterfully, planting the seeds of doubt. One of Garbo's agents, who supposedly worked in the London Underground, reported that the tunnels were being extended toward the southeast. Ammunition was being moved through them. Another agent saw assault barges gathering at Dover and convoys of Canadian troops arriving in Southampton. Garbo himself began reporting an entire fictitious U.S. Army division gathering in the southeast. All of it pointed to one thing: an invasion at Calais, the shortest crossing point between Britain and France. To back up Garbo's lies, the British started planting real evidence all over southeast England. Fake airstrips were cut into fields, hollow wooden planes placed beside them. German reconnaissance planes started bombing these decoys, so they knew it was working. A massive fake oil storage facility was built in Dover. Photos of King George visiting the site appeared in local newspapers. Inflatable tanks, Hollywood-style fake battleships, an entire phantom army. The goal? Convince the Germans that Normandy was just a diversion, and that the real invasion would come later at Calais. And it worked. British intelligence intercepted a conversation between Hitler and a Japanese ambassador, where Hitler mentioned that the first attack would be a decoy. Garbo's messages were landing directly on Hitler's desk, and he believed every word. The Germans moved hundreds of thousands of troops to Calais, troops that wouldn't be in Normandy. June 5, 1944. The night before, German radio operators usually signed off at 11:30 p.m., but Garbo insisted they stay awake. Big news was coming at 3 o'clock a.m. At exactly 3 o'clock, Garbo transmitted, "Soldiers have been issued vomit bags and rations. This can only mean one thing." Hours passed. No response. The Germans had gone to sleep. At 6:30 a.m., the Allies arrived at Normandy completely undetected. They outnumbered the German defenders more than 3-1. It was brutal. It was chaotic. But the Allies secured their foothold in France, and over the next 6 weeks, they poured troops, vehicles, and supplies through the beaches of Normandy. Astonishingly, the Nazis still refused to move reinforcements from Calais. They were waiting for the second invasion, the one that would never come. 2 medals, 2 sides, 1 man. Every letter, every lie, every tiny detail. It had all worked. The Allies recaptured Europe. The war turned. And despite Germany's defeat, Hitler was so impressed with Garbo's intelligence that he awarded him the Iron Cross. At the same time, Britain awarded him an OBE, making him the only person in history to receive military honors from both sides of the same war. The Vanishing Act. After the war, Pujol feared Nazi sympathizers would come looking for him. So he did what he did best. He faked his own ending. He moved to Venezuela, disappeared into quiet anonymity, and was never heard from again. For 40 years, the world thought he was gone. The writer who wouldn't let go. But in the 1980s, a British writer named Nigel West became obsessed with finding Garbo. He got hold of a Barcelona phone directory and started calling every Juan Garcia in the area. There were many. Eventually, one of Garbo's nephews answered. Contact was made. After decades of silence and a lot of convincing, Garbo agreed to return to Europe. He visited Normandy, walked the beaches, saw the memorials, and for the first time truly understood how many lives his lies had saved. Closing. The power of one Juan Pujol García was not a soldier. He had no training, no weapons, no army, just imagination, courage, and an unshakable belief that one person could make a difference. He built an empire of ghosts, fooled the most powerful military machine on Earth, and helped turn the tide of the largest conflict in human history, all from a desk, with a pen, and a refusal to stay silent. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't force. It's the truth you choose to tell, and the lies you make them believe. Garbo proved that wars aren't just won on battlefields. They're won in the margins, in the details, in the stories we tell, and the choices we make when no one's watching. 1 man, 27 fake agents, and a world that would never be the same.